You're supposed to be, as a therapist, you stand there. I'm trying to do that, stay out of everybody's way. What sort of posture is this? Yeah. Boom. All right. So, first we're going to find C1. All right. The way to find C1 is to find the mastoid processes of your contestant, and then draw a line, and just kind of try to connect those two fingers as best you can. And hopefully you'll know occiput is up here, the big, large bony thing. You're going to be on the posterior tubercle of C1 if you drew your line really well. You can't really palpate that. You're not really going to feel it too well. But you can feel the transverse processes of C1 because they're the biggest in the cervical spine. So you just want to kind of come out here and go ahead and look for a bony structure that projects out laterally. And that is what I'm on over here. When you're doing it, you can do it lying down. But you can go ask the person to kind of rotate their head away, and you'll be able to feel that transverse process move around underneath your finger. So while you're doing it, you can do it sitting, you can do it supine. Either way, try to go ahead and gauge if you're on the transverse process as they move their head around. It should slide anteriorly on a curved path. So that is transverse process of C1. Very important one to find, actually, for doing joint mobs. So that's C1. Cover that one. You guys got it? Not a bad one. So we have to reset. Go back to where the posterior tubercle of C1 is supposed to be, and one finger width below should be the spinous process of C2. So they're all one finger width below each other, so now spinous process of C2. Sometimes you'll be able to feel the bifurcation in C2. Not really too much on Sam, but some of your other partners you might really feel a bifurcation. Then you go down one finger width, and you will find C3, spinous process. And then you go ahead and just one finger width, you find C4. And where it starts to get a wee bit tricky, C5. And notice how the spinous processes are actually getting a lot smaller as you go down. C6. And then they get a lot bigger as soon as you get to C7. That's the tricky part though. Are you on C7 or T1? This is the hack. This is the important one. Find what you think is C7, which I think is this guy. And I'm going to place my finger on what then I think is C6, so they should be right above one another. I'm going to ask my partner to go ahead and flex his head. It becomes more prominent, and then go ahead and lift up. It should disappear. So that's C6. C6 is the last vertebrae that will do that. C7 does not do that. So if you're palpating C7, it should remain roughly prominent as you do flexion and extension. If they both remain prominent, you're on C7 and T1, and you are too low. So they both feel really prominent. They're not really moving around too much, so I'm too low, so I need to move back up again. I'm on C7, C6, spinous process. We flex, it comes up into my fingers. He extends, C6 slides and disappears and goes away. So that is how you find C6. Then you got C7, and you can start going down to thoracic, T1, T2, T3, and then try to find the middle part of the thoracic spine. So that's that. You can find the transverse processes of each individual cervical spine vertebrae. Once you find the spinous process, you can just go off laterally, and they won't be as big as the transverse processes of C1. They'll be a lot smaller, a lot shallower, and you can kind of also feel those guys rotate and move around as you produce cervical spine rotation. So you can kind of get a feel if you're on a transverse process, if you still feel a bony structure moving around versus being over here. I'm just on fleshy, squishy thing, and I don't really feel a bone moving around. So I know I came off of them. I know I have to backtrack to the posterior part of the spine. So that you can also do side bending too, if you're so inclined to feel the transverse processes moving around. So that was it. Any questions about those guys? Kind of straightforward. Once you get the landmarks, the hacks are find the mastoid, you find C1, find transverse processes. Each subsequent spinous process is one finger width below. Get down to C6, C7, do head flexion and extension to differentiate between which is which. And yeah, you're pretty good to go for the spinous and transverse processes of the cervical spine vertebrae. Since we're here, we need to find this crazy muscle, semispinal splenius capitis, which is not on the side. But whatever, I'm going to show you where splenius capitis is anyway, because I feel like I should do that for you guys. So occipital bone, right back here. We don't want to go straight down and straight posterior, because that is upper trap. What we want to do is kind of go off the lateral part of it, and you're going to feel this fleshy, little tiny muscle belly right along in here. It's like 3 or 4 fingers width wide, but it is kind of a broad, flattish muscle belly. Sam, go ahead and extend. Up a little less vigorously. And also you can ask your partner to side bend to that side as well, and you might be able to feel it contract and pop out. As exciting as that muscle is, it's actually your landmark for trying to find levator scapula. What you need to do is to kind of go find the flat, broad muscle belly, and then palpate inferiorly until you find a diagonal tubular, let's call it tubular muscle belly for levator scapula. Go ahead and elevate your shoulder, just really gently, Sam, and relax. All right, elevate again, and relax. So that is going to be where levator scapula is. There's an alternative method in the textbook. You can elevate again, Sam, and relax. Since we got Sam here, sorry, I'm just going to slide this down a bit. You can keep your head up, because that's what we need. What you can do is find upper trap, vertical. Upper trap is going off on an angle right over here, kind of horizontally. You kind of go and find in that sweet area as they kind of transition from one direction to another. You kind of go on that little point and you go anterior to find levator scapula again, which is right here. And I don't know if you guys watch the videos at all. He's like palpating all the way down to the superior angle somehow from this position, which I don't really see how he did that. But that is where levator scapula is going to be. You just want to check to make sure that you're not on SCM by having the person move their head around. You know SCM pretty well by now because you can see it moving around as the person moves their head about. So it's not the SCM that he's moving around. Take a deep breath, and we would feel posterior scalene would be involved in inhalation, and then go ahead, raise your shoulder, and we got activation going on underneath there. So that is where levator scapula is. So that the key is finding splenius capitis, dropping down, and finding a diagonally shaped, diagonally oriented muscle, and then just go ahead and do the rest. And that was it. So let's go practice.